Okay, so a quick and dirty intro to part 2 of my answers to your questions for the first quarter of 2022. Let's just get into it. Okay, so Jonathan Robinson asks if it's better to wind automatic watches or use a watch winder. I am not a watchmaker. I am an engineer, but not in that space. I'm not going to tell you what I think you should do professionally. What I'll say is I don't own a watch winder. I generally believe that you want to keep the duty cycle on any mechanical machine to the minimum required just to keep some lubrication circling around. The idea of having something operate purely for the sake of operating doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Therefore, I do not have a watch winder. There you go. Make of that what you will. Okay, Dara Rowan asks, what do I think will be the next big thing to hit the watch industry or the community? Man, if I could be specific about that, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have a day job. I'd actually be working in the industry. But, and so I really thought hard. I can't think of, like, if you're asking for a color or a style or a genre, but something came out recently talking with the Morgan & Stanley results for 2022 on, which is actually looking back at 2021 on watch brands and something. And they haven't released anywhere near as much data as they did last year. So it's not, I'm probably not going to do an analysis like I did last year because there's just not enough data coming out. But they did show something really interesting. The big groups, particularly Swatch, are falling apart. They are falling so far behind the independent brands that I think there is going to be some kind of shakeup in the group structures. I think the evidence is becoming clear that groups are not managing themselves or their brands effectively, and that something needs to change. I suspect that we are going to see absolutely Swatch, probably Richemont, less likely to be LVMH, do a Kering and cull some of their brands and clear the decks and concentrate on some winners and give them more love and attention. So what do I think the next big thing to hit the watch community will be, industry will be? At least two of the groups, Richemont and Swatch, are going to have a culling, and we're going to lose some brands. That's what I think will be the next tsunami to hit the industry. Knuckle Dragger asks, what are my thoughts on Grand Seiko? Absolutely love them. Before I go on, something I've got to say. I'm a Seiko file. I like Seiko. I collect Seiko Prospex divers. Why is that relevant to Grand Seiko? Because I simply don't buy into the idea that Grand Seiko is in any way diminished through its relationship with Seiko. So many people say, now, isn't Grand Seiko just a glorified Seiko? And to me, that makes no sense. The premise of that comment is misplaced. Seiko is great. No one makes more of their own watches than Seiko. No one has a wider variety of technologies than Seiko. No one else can do what Seiko does, with the possible exception, I suppose, of Citizen. But let's put Citizen to a side for a second. Being part of the Seiko group should be celebrated, not mourned. And so Grand Seiko being able to leverage that and then bring all of what Seiko gives them, but then address that in a way that appeals to a more European, Swiss sensibility is fantastic. I love Grand Seiko. I love what they do. I think that there are some weaknesses. I think their sports lines are horrible. I think they really do need to take a deep breath and have a look at their sports collections. But apart from that, no, I'm a big Grand Seiko fan. Vegan Dinner asks, do Tudor need a replacement for the North Flag and Ranger? Yes and no. Okay, so no. Do they need to put out a watch that looks like a Ranger? No. Do they need to put out a watch that looks like a North Flag or is a North Flag 2? No, they don't. However, they do need to do something in that space space. And what is that space? It's the contemporary and looking forward space. The Black Bay gives Tudor a fantastic platform for looking backwards. The Black Bay is a great retro revival line, and it makes no bones about it. That's what it's trying to be, and that's what it does brilliantly. But there's nothing in that area of of Tudor that looks forward and says, where can we move to after the mid 50s and 60s? Actually, that's not true. There is something. There's the Pelagos line. So what should they do? They should do to the Pelagos line what they have done to the Black Bay line and create from the Pelagos, create a whole brand, a whole new collection that captures all of the things that the Ranger and the North Flag also gave. There should be GMTs in there and field-oriented watches. Watches that don't have bezels, and all of the other things that happen in the Black Bay line should be replicated in the Pelagos line, and then that would essentially give Tudor buyers their modern equivalent to the Ranger and the North Flag. I think that's what Tudor needs. If I was the CEO of Tudor, I would do that tomorrow. Okay, so Richard Bartlett asks a simple question. Do I think the war in Ukraine will affect watch sales and aftermarket prices? Two answers to that. In the short term, there'll be a little bit of a dip, I think, or a little bit of a rise in availability, a little bit of dip in sales pressure. Watch brands have announced that they're pulling out of Russia. That's 250, 260 million Swiss francs a year in wholesale, so call it $500 million worth of retail that's going to get smeared across the rest of the world. Things will get a little bit more available, but in the greater scheme of things, it's not going to make that big a difference. On the other hand, the war in Ukraine is yet another log on the inflationary fire. Inflation in the US, I think, is now averaging something like 7, maybe 8%. That's going to change things in investment patterns. That's going to change people's appetites to save, potentially pay off some loans and that sort of thing as interest rates go up. So I can see that there might be a little bit of air taken out of the watch, and particularly the hype investment watch world, but I'd say a little bit of air. I'm not predicting any kind of wholesale fire sale. No bubble popping here. Rather a slowdown in the amount of air going into that bubble. I think that's the most we're going to see. Yeah, so that's it. They're my answers to your questions. I did my best to keep my answers short and sharp, but at the same time honest and give you exactly how I feel. Hope that was okay. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. I will see you later. Bye.